Last Christmas, my sister Madison told me I wasn't worth a seat at our family table. She said it with such casual cruelty, like discussing the weather. What she didn't know was that I'd just discovered something that would make her regret those words forever. See, Madison had always been the golden child, the successful lawyer who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. But I'd stumbled upon bank statements that revealed a very different truth about my perfect sister. Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and smash that like button if you're ready for some serious family drama justice. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next when family loyalty meets financial betrayal. It all started 3 months before that devastating Christmas dinner. I was helping Dad organize his home office while he recovered from knee surgery. Mom was at book club and Madison was supposedly working late again at her prestigious law firm downtown. Dad had asked me to file some papers in his desk drawer, and that's when I saw them. Bank statements scattered underneath old tax returns. At first, I thought nothing of it. Just routine financial documents. But something caught my eye: regular transfers of $10,000 every month for the past 2 years, all going to an account labeled MR, Holdings. The name meant nothing to me initially, but the amounts were staggering. 24 transfers, each exactly $10,000. That was nearly $250,000 flowing out of Dad's retirement account. I felt sick. Dad was 68 and had been talking about how tight money was getting since Mom's medical bills from her cancer treatment last year. They'd been discussing selling their dream vacation home in Colorado, the one they'd saved for 30 years to buy. Dad had even mentioned picking up consulting work to make ends meet despite his arthritis making it painful to sit at a computer for long periods. But here was evidence of massive withdrawals that made no sense. Dad wasn't the type to make risky investments or fall for scams. He was methodical, careful with money, the kind of man who compared grocery store prices and clipped coupons religiously. These transfers were completely out of character. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop myself from digging deeper. I found more statements dating back 3 years. The pattern was consistent: $10,000 same day each month, always to MR Holdings. My hands shook as I calculated the total. $360,000, more than half of Dad's retirement savings gone. That's when I remembered something that made my blood run cold. 2 years ago, Madison had suddenly upgraded everything in her life. New BMW, expensive condo in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, designer clothes, exotic vacations she posted constantly on social media. When I'd asked how she afforded it all on a junior associate's salary, she'd laughed it off, saying she'd gotten a massive promotion and was handling bigger cases now. But I knew Madison's career timeline. She'd been struggling at her firm, working ungodly hours on mundane research projects. Associates didn't just jump to that kind of money overnight, especially not at her mid-tier firm. I'd always assumed she was living beyond her means, maybe drowning in credit card debt behind the facade. The initials MR suddenly made sense. Madison Rose, our grandmother's maiden name that Madison had always loved. She'd often talked about using it professionally someday. I sat in Dad's office staring at those numbers, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. My sister, the one our parents bragged about at every family gathering, the one who gave speeches about integrity and justice, was stealing from our own father. She was literally taking money meant for his retirement money he needed for Mom's ongoing medical care. But I needed proof before I could accuse her. Over the next 2 weeks, I carefully documented everything. I took photos of the bank statements, researched MR Holdings, and discovered it was a shell company registered to Madison's address. I even drove by her condo building and saw the BMW she claimed to lease parked in the resident parking with Madison Rose printed on a temporary registration tag visible through the window. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. This wasn't just theft. It was theft from family, from parents who had sacrificed everything for their daughter's education and futures. Dad had worked double shifts at the factory for 20 years to pay for Madison's law school. Mom had taken on extra nursing shifts to help with living expenses. They'd given Madison every advantage, and this was how she repaid them. What made it worse was how Madison treated me during this time. She'd always been condescending, but lately she'd become downright cruel. At Dad's birthday dinner, she'd made snide comments about my career as a social worker, asking when I'd get a real job that actually mattered. She'd rolled her eyes when I couldn't afford to split the bill equally at expensive restaurants she insisted on choosing for family meals. The irony was devastating. She was funding her lavish lifestyle with Dad's retirement money while simultaneously mocking my modest income and career choices. She was literally stealing from our parents to maintain an image of success that she used to belittle me. I realized I had to tell our parents, but I also knew they'd never believe me without overwhelming evidence. Madison was their pride and joy, their success story. I was just the daughter who'd chosen a career helping troubled kids instead of chasing money. In their eyes, Madison could do no wrong. So I decided to wait to gather even more evidence to make sure my case was absolutely ironclad. I had no idea that this decision would lead to the most humiliating moment of my life, and ultimately the most satisfying revenge I'd ever witnessed. The Christmas dinner incident happened exactly 6 weeks after my discovery. Our extended family was gathering for the first time in 2 years. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and my grandmother who'd driven up from Florida specifically to see everyone together. Mom had been planning this dinner for months, constantly worrying about having enough seating, enough food, enough everything to make it perfect. The dining room was beautifully set with Mom's good china and our grandmother's vintage silverware. Madison had arrived an hour late, making a grand entrance in a new designer dress that probably cost more than I made in a month. She hugged everyone dramatically, apologizing for being delayed by an important client call that she described in unnecessary detail to impress our relatives. When it came time to sit down, we discovered a problem. Mom had miscounted somewhere, and we were 1 chair short. It wasn't a huge deal. Someone could easily grab a chair from the kitchen, or we could rearrange the living room furniture. But Madison immediately took charge of the situation in the most humiliating way possible. "Well, someone needs to figure this out," she announced, surveying the table like she was presiding over a board meeting. Her eyes landed on me, and I saw something cold and calculating in her expression. "I mean, some people here have actually contributed to this family's success, and some people—" She trailed off with a meaningful look in my direction. I felt everyone's eyes on me, confusion rippling through the room. "Madison, what are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm saying that maybe the person who can't even afford to bring a decent bottle of wine to Christmas dinner doesn't really deserve a seat at the adult table," she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I brought a $150 Bordeaux. Uncle Tom brought that amazing cheese platter. Everyone else here has actually made something of themselves." The silence was deafening. I looked around the table at my family members' shocked faces. Cousin Sarah looked mortified. Uncle Tom was studying his napkin intensely. Even my normally confrontational Aunt Patricia seemed at a loss for words. "Madison," Dad said quietly, "that's completely inappropriate." But Madison wasn't done. I'm just saying that some of us have worked hard to build successful careers and contribute to this family's reputation. Some of us are actually worth the space we take up." She gestured toward the empty spot where a 13th chair should have been. "Maybe Emma should just eat in the kitchen. She's used to serving people anyway, right?" The cruelty of that moment still takes my breath away. Madison knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that our extended family didn't fully understand what I did for work, that they sometimes made comments about when I'd find a husband or a real career. She was weaponizing their occasional ignorance to publicly humiliate me. But what Madison didn't know was that I had those bank statements memorized. Every date, every amount, every transfer from Dad's account to her shell company. As I stood there feeling smaller and more worthless with each passing second, something inside me snapped. "You know what, Madison?" "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Some people at this table have definitely been taking more than their fair share." She looked triumphant, thinking I was conceding defeat. "Exactly. So maybe you should—" "No, I mean some people have been taking exactly $240,000 more than their fair share." I interrupted, my voice getting stronger. "Some people have been taking $10,000 a month from Dad's retirement account for the past 2 years to fund their fake successful lifestyle." The room erupted. Madison's face went white, then red, then white again. "What are you talking about? You're obviously having some kind of breakdown. MR Holdings," I said simply. "Ring a bell because it should, since that's the shell company you set up to steal from your own father." Madison started to speak, but I kept going. "The BMW you claim to lease registered to Madison Rose. The condo you supposedly afford on a junior associate salary paid for with Dad's retirement money. Every single designer dress, every exotic vacation, every expensive dinner where you've mocked my income, all funded by stealing from the man who worked double shifts to pay for your law school." "This is ridiculous," Madison sputtered, but I could see panic in her eyes. "Dad, she's clearly unstable. This is some kind of jealous fantasy." "Show them the bank statements, Dad," I said quietly. "The ones in your desk drawer, the transfers to MR Holdings. Show everyone exactly how Madison has been contributing to this family's success." Dad's face had gone completely pale. "Emma, what are you saying? Madison would never—" "Check your account, Dad, right now. Check it in front of everyone." The next 10 minutes were excruciating. Dad pulled up his banking app on his phone with shaking hands, his face growing more ashen with each swipe. Mom was crying quietly, not understanding what was happening, but sensing the catastrophe unfolding. Our relatives sat frozen, not knowing whether to leave or stay or pretend they hadn't heard any of this. Madison kept trying to spin it, claiming the transfers were legitimate investments she was handling for Dad that she'd meant to tell everyone, but wanted to surprise them with the returns. But her explanations were weak and contradictory, and everyone could see the truth written on her face. $360,000, Dad whispered, staring at his phone screen. "Madison, what have you done?" The family dinner dissolved into chaos. Madison grabbed her purse and stormed out, screaming about family loyalty and how she was being set up by a jealous sister. Half the relatives left immediately, too uncomfortable to stay. The other half stayed to help Mom clean up the untouched dinner, while Dad sat in his chair staring at his phone like it contained the meaning of life. But I felt no satisfaction in that moment. Only grief for what we'd lost and determination to make sure Madison faced real consequences for what she'd done to our family. The war was just beginning. In the 3 weeks following the Christmas dinner catastrophe, I discovered that exposing Madison publicly was just the beginning. She'd already begun her counteroffensive, and it was more vicious and calculated than I could have imagined. Madison had immediately hired a crisis management attorney and was spreading a carefully crafted story throughout our extended family and social circles. According to her version, I was a mentally unstable, jealous sister who'd misunderstood legitimate financial arrangements and destroyed Christmas with delusional accusations. She painted herself as the victim of a disturbed sibling's fantasy, someone whose successful career had always triggered my deep-seated insecurities. The worst part was how effective her strategy was proving to be. Aunt Patricia called Mom to express concern about my episode at dinner. Cousin Sarah sent a carefully worded text asking if I was getting help for my obvious emotional problems. Even some family friends began treating me with the kind of gentle, pitying concern reserved for people experiencing mental health crises. Madison was using her legal training to destroy my credibility while simultaneously covering her tracks. She'd moved quickly to close the MR Holdings account and transfer the remaining funds to offshore accounts that would be much harder to trace. She'd also retained David Goldman, one of the city's most ruthless defense attorneys who specialized in white-collar crime and family disputes. But Madison made one crucial mistake. She underestimated my determination and my ability to build alliances of my own. My first unexpected ally came from the most unlikely place. Jennifer Walsh was one of Madison's colleagues at Morrison Klein & Associates, the mid-tier law firm where Madison worked. I'd met Jennifer briefly at a few office holiday parties over the years, but we'd never really spoken beyond pleasantries. Jennifer reached out to me 2 days after the new year, asking to meet for coffee. She'd heard about the Christmas incident through office gossip. Apparently, Madison had been telling everyone about her psychotic sister's public breakdown and rallying sympathy from colleagues. "I wasn't sure if I should contact you," Jennifer said, stirring her latte nervously as we sat in a quiet corner of a downtown cafe. But something Madison said didn't sit right with me, and then I started putting pieces together. Jennifer explained that she'd been handling some of Madison's case files while Madison was on vacation the previous month. She'd noticed discrepancies in billable hours and client account management that hadn't made sense at the time, but were starting to form a disturbing pattern. Madison has been billing clients for work she never did, Jennifer said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. She's been inflating hours, claiming research and preparation time for cases that were settled months ago, even billing for court appearances that never happened. The amounts are significant, tens of thousands of dollars per client. Jennifer had been keeping detailed records because she'd suspected something was wrong but hadn't known what to do about it. Madison was well liked by the partners and had a reputation as a rising star. Accusing her of billing fraud would be career suicide for a junior associate like Jennifer, especially without absolute proof. But if what you said about the stolen money is true, Jennifer continued, then Madison needed those fake billings to maintain her lifestyle once she started taking money from your father. The timeline matches perfectly with when her spending increased dramatically. Jennifer had documentation of Madison's fraudulent billing practices going back 18 months. Client files with fabricated time entries, expense reports for non-existent travel, even fake receipts for research materials that were never purchased. It was a systematic pattern of theft from the firm's clients designed to supplement the money Madison was stealing from Dad. This was the breakthrough I needed. Madison wasn't just stealing from family. She was committing multiple felonies that could result in disbarment and serious jail time. Better yet, Jennifer was willing to cooperate with any investigation despite the risk to her own career. My second ally emerged from my own professional network in an equally unexpected way. Maria Santos was a forensic accountant who'd worked with my social services department on several child welfare cases involving financial abuse. I'd mentioned Madison's situation during a consultation about an unrelated case, and Maria had immediately offered to help on a pro bono basis. Family financial abuse cases are some of the most underreported crimes in America, Maria explained as she reviewed the bank statements and documents I'd gathered. Elderly parents are especially vulnerable because they trust their children implicitly and often don't understand modern financial systems well enough to detect sophisticated theft. Maria's expertise was invaluable. She could trace financial patterns that I'd missed, identify hidden assets, and prepare documentation that would be admissible in court. Within a week, she'd uncovered additional evidence that made Madison's crimes even more extensive than I'd originally discovered. Madison had been taking money from Dad's account for nearly 3 years, not 2. She'd started small, just a few $1,000s here and there, and gradually increased the amounts as she became more confident that her theft wouldn't be detected. The total stolen amount was actually closer to $400,000. Even more damaging, Maria discovered that Madison had forged Dad's signature on several financial documents to facilitate the transfers. She'd used Dad's trust in her to gain access to his accounts, then systematically looted his retirement savings while manipulating the paper trail to delay detection. But Maria's most devastating finding involved Mom's medical expenses. Madison had been claiming reimbursements from Dad's health savings account for Mom's cancer treatments, but instead of using that money for medical bills, she'd been depositing it into her personal accounts. Mom's treatments had been paid for through Dad's regular checking account, creating a double financial burden that had forced our parents to drain their emergency savings. "Your sister didn't just steal money," Maria explained grimly. "She actively made your mother's cancer treatment more financially devastating for your family while profiting from the situation. This shows a level of callousness that goes beyond simple greed." My third ally was the most surprising of all. Robert Morrison, the founding partner of Madison's law firm, contacted me directly after Jennifer had quietly submitted her documentation to the firm's ethics committee. Morrison was a man in his 70s who'd built his reputation on integrity and ethical practice. "Miss Taylor, yes," he said during our phone conversation. "I want you to know that Morrison Klein & Associates takes allegations of billing fraud extremely seriously. If Miss Madison has been stealing from our clients while using our firm's reputation to facilitate theft from her own family, we will pursue every legal remedy available to us." Morrison explained that the firm would be conducting an immediate internal investigation and would likely be filing criminal charges against Madison within days. He also offered to provide expert testimony about Madison's billing fraud if my family decided to pursue criminal charges for the theft from Dad. In 45 years of practice, I've never seen such a comprehensive pattern of professional and personal betrayal, Morrison said. Miss Madison won't just lose her job. She'll never practice law again anywhere in this country. As January progressed, I realized that Madison's house of cards was collapsing faster than she could manage the damage. Her attempts to discredit me were becoming increasingly desperate and transparent. She'd hired David Goldman on retainer, but even the best defense attorney couldn't overcome the mountain of evidence we were building against her. More importantly, I was learning that Madison's cruel treatment of me at Christmas dinner had actually backfired. Several family members who'd initially believed her story about my mental breakdown were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about the financial evidence. Uncle Tom, who managed investments for several family members, had quietly reviewed Dad's bank statements and confirmed that the transfers to MR Holdings were absolutely unauthorized. Even Aunt Patricia, who'd never liked me much, called to apologize for initially doubting my accusations. "I should have known better," she said. "Madison always was too slick, too ready with explanations for everything. Your father is the most honest man I've ever known. He'd never be involved in some secret investment scheme." By the end of January, I had a team of professionals ready to bring Madison down documented evidence of crimes totaling nearly $500,000 and growing family support for pursuing justice. Madison had spent weeks trying to destroy my credibility, but she'd only succeeded in exposing the depth of her own deception. The stage was set for the confrontation that would determine Madison's fate and our family's future. But I had no idea that Madison still had one more devastating card to play. One that would temporarily turn my moment of triumph into the darkest period of my life. Just when I thought Madison was finally cornered, she delivered the most devastating blow of our entire conflict. It came through the last person I expected to betray me, Maria Santos, the forensic accountant who'd been helping build our case against Madison. The betrayal began subtly in early February. Maria started missing scheduled meetings, claiming emergency cases with other clients. Her responses to my emails became delayed and oddly formal. When I asked about the progress on Madison's financial analysis, she gave vague answers about needing more time to verify certain transactions. I should have recognized the warning signs, but I was too focused on the mounting evidence against Madison to notice that my most crucial ally was pulling away. Maria had been the backbone of our case, the professional expert whose testimony would make Madison's crimes undeniable in court. Without her forensic analysis, we had bank statements and suspicious transfers, but nothing that definitively proved criminal intent or systematic fraud. The truth came crashing down on February 14th, Valentine's Day of all days. I received a call from Jennifer Walsh, my ally at Madison's law firm, and I could hear tears in her voice before she even spoke. "Emma, I'm so sorry," Jennifer whispered into the phone. "Maria Santos just contacted Morrison's ethics committee. She's claiming that you fabricated evidence against Madison and coerced her into supporting false allegations against your sister." The room spun around me. "That's impossible. Maria has all the documentation. She verified everything herself. She's saying you manipulated bank statements and forged transfer records." Jennifer continued, her voice breaking. "She's claiming you're having a psychotic episode and that she only went along with your delusions because she was afraid you might hurt yourself or others." I felt like I was drowning. "Jennifer, you know that's not true. You saw Madison's fraudulent billing records yourself. You were there when—" "Emma, there's more. Maria provided the ethics committee with what she claims is evidence of your mental instability. Text messages where you allegedly threatened to harm Madison if she didn't confess to crimes she never committed. Audio recordings of phone calls where you supposedly admitted to falsifying documents." The sophisticated cruelty of Madison's counterattack was breathtaking. She'd somehow gotten to Maria, the one person whose professional credibility could destroy my case completely. Maria's betrayal wasn't just personally devastating, it was strategically brilliant. A forensic accountant recanting her testimony and claiming the evidence was fabricated would make any prosecutor drop the case immediately. How? I whispered into the phone. How did Madison get to her? Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. I think I know, but you're not going to like it. Maria Santos wasn't just any forensic accountant. She's David Goldman's ex-wife. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. David Goldman Madison's high-powered defense attorney had been married to the woman I'd trusted to build our case. Maria had access to every piece of evidence we'd gathered, every strategy we'd discussed, every weakness in Madison's defense. She'd been feeding information to Madison's legal team from the very beginning. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago, Jennifer explained. Apparently, it was extremely bitter. David got most of their assets, including Maria's forensic accounting practice. She's been struggling financially ever since taking whatever cases she can find. I realized with growing horror that Madison had probably offered Maria enough money to solve her financial problems in exchange for sabotaging our case. It was the perfect setup. Maria could claim she'd been manipulated by an unstable woman, recant her testimony, and walk away with enough money to restart her career somewhere else. There's more bad news, Jennifer said quietly. The law firm is putting their internal investigation on hold, pending the outcome of the Ethics Committee's review of Maria's allegations. If they determine that the evidence against Madison was fabricated, Morrison's going to drop the case entirely. Within hours, the betrayal cascaded into complete disaster. Robert Morrison called to inform me that the firm would no longer cooperate with any investigation against Madison pending the resolution of serious questions about evidence tampering. Uncle Tom called to say that several family members were reconsidering their support in light of the allegations about fabricated bank statements. Even worse, Madison had weaponized Maria's betrayal to launch a full legal counteroffensive. David Goldman filed a restraining order against me on Madison's behalf, claiming I'd been stalking and harassing her with false accusations. The order prohibited me from contacting Madison directly or indirectly, attending family gatherings where she'd be present, or discussing the allegations with other family members. Madison also threatened to file criminal charges against me for harassment, defamation, and evidence tampering. Goldman sent a letter to my employer suggesting that my deteriorating mental state made me unsuitable for social work, particularly cases involving vulnerable families. He implied that the state licensing board should review my fitness to practice. The most devastating blow came from my own parents. Dad called me 3 days after Maria's betrayal, his voice heavy with confusion and disappointment. "Emma, sweetheart, I don't know what to believe anymore," he said. "Madison's lawyer showed us documentation that suggests you might have altered those bank statements. The forensic accountant we trusted is saying you manipulated her into supporting false claims." "Dad, please," I begged. "You know me. You know I would never—" "I thought I knew Madison, too," Dad interrupted sadly. "I thought I knew both my daughters, but now there are professionals saying things that don't make sense, lawyers threatening lawsuits, and I just want this nightmare to end." Mom got on the phone and I could hear she'd been crying. "Emma, honey, maybe you should take a break from all this. Maybe you should talk to someone, get some help sorting through your feelings about Madison's success. This whole situation has gotten so out of hand." The implication was clear. My own parents were starting to believe Madison's version of events. They thought their younger daughter was having a mental breakdown triggered by jealousy of their older daughter's achievements. They wanted me to stop pursuing the allegations and seek psychiatric treatment. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I faced the darkest moment of my life. Madison had systematically destroyed my credibility, turned my allies against me, and convinced even my parents that I was delusional. She'd stolen nearly $500,000 from our family and was not only going to get away with it, she was positioning herself as the victim of her mentally ill sister's vindictive fantasies. I seriously considered giving up. The legal and emotional cost of fighting Madison was destroying my life, my career, and my relationships. Maybe it would be easier to accept defeat, get the psychiatric treatment everyone thought I needed, and try to rebuild some semblance of a normal life. But then I remembered the look on Dad's face when he'd realized $360,000 was missing from his retirement account. I thought about Mom's cancer treatments and the financial stress that Madison's theft had added to an already devastating situation. I pictured Madison's cruel smile as she'd told me I wasn't worth a seat at the family table. Madison had won this battle through manipulation, bribery, and legal maneuvering. But the war wasn't over yet. I just needed to find one person who could see through her lies, one ally strong enough to help me expose the truth before Madison destroyed our family completely. My salvation came from the most unexpected source imaginable: Madison's own arrogance and a retired FBI agent with a grudge against corrupt lawyers. 3 weeks into March, when I'd almost lost hope completely, I received a call from someone named Detective Ray Sullivan. He was recently retired from the FBI's white-collar crime division and was working as a private investigator for a client who'd heard about my case through professional networks. "Miss Taylor, my name is Ray Sullivan, and I believe your sister has made some very powerful enemies," he said in a gravelly voice that suggested decades of cigarettes and late nights. "I'm calling because someone wants Madison Rose Taylor to face justice for more than just stealing from her family." Sullivan explained that he'd been hired by 3 former clients of Morrison Klein and Associates who'd discovered they'd been victims of Madison's billing fraud. These weren't just ordinary clients. They were executives from major corporations who'd been overcharged tens of thousands of dollars for legal work Madison had never performed. "Corporate executives don't like being stolen from," Sullivan said dryly, "especially when the theft comes from someone they trusted with sensitive business matters. My clients want every dollar back plus punitive damages, plus they want to see Madison disbarred and prosecuted to the full extent of the law." But Sullivan had uncovered something even more damaging than billing fraud. Madison had been using confidential client information to make illegal insider trading investments using the stolen money from Dad's account as her initial capital. "Your sister is smart, I'll give her that," Sullivan explained during our meeting at a downtown diner. She realized that having access to corporate legal strategies before they became public gave her a huge advantage in the stock market. She'd learn about mergers, acquisitions, patent disputes, regulatory challenges, all information that could predict stock price movements. Sullivan spread dozens of documents across our booth's table, trading records, client communications, market analysis reports, and financial statements. The paper trail was overwhelming and indisputable. Madison would learn that Corporation A was planning to acquire Corporation B, then use your father's money to buy Corporation B stock before the merger was announced publicly. When the stock price jumped after the announcement, she'd sell for massive profits, Sullivan continued. "It's textbook insider trading, and it's what allowed her to steal so much money without destroying her lifestyle." The insider trading scheme was brilliant and absolutely illegal. Madison had used her position at the law firm to generate millions in illegal profits, which she'd been using to fund her lavish lifestyle while continuing to steal from Dad's retirement account. The stolen family money was just her initial investment capital. Her real wealth came from securities fraud. "But here's the beautiful part," Sullivan said with a satisfied grin. "Maria Santos documented everything. Even after she betrayed you, her original forensic analysis is still legally admissible. She can claim she was manipulated into supporting your case, but she can't claim she fabricated the trading records because they're verified through multiple independent financial institutions." Sullivan had been investigating Madison for 6 months, long before I'd ever contacted Maria Santos. His corporate clients had hired him after discovering discrepancies in their legal bills, and his investigation had uncovered the insider trading scheme. Maria's betrayal had actually worked in our favor by forcing Sullivan's clients to accelerate their timeline for filing criminal charges. "Maria Santos can recant her testimony about your family situation all she wants," Sullivan explained. "But she can't recant mathematics. The trading records, the timing of stock purchases, the correlation between client information and investment decisions. That evidence exists independently of anything she told you." Even better, Sullivan had discovered evidence that Maria's betrayal hadn't been voluntary. David Goldman had threatened to destroy Maria's career and reputation if she didn't cooperate with Madison's defense strategy. He'd used their bitter divorce proceedings to coerce her into sabotaging our case. "Goldman made a crucial mistake," Sullivan said. "He documented his threats against Maria in text messages and emails that my client's subpoena power allowed us to access. Coercing a witness to provide false testimony is obstruction of justice and witness tampering, felonies that could get Goldman disbarred and imprisoned." Sullivan's investigation had also uncovered the truth about Madison's supposed success at Morrison Klein and Associates. Far from being a rising star, Madison was actually under internal review for poor performance and ethical violations. The partners had been planning to terminate her employment before the Christmas dinner incident brought everything to light. Madison's desperate lifestyle inflation wasn't just about greed, Sullivan explained. She was trying to maintain the appearance of success while her career was actually falling apart. The stolen money and illegal trading were her way of avoiding professional humiliation. Within 2 weeks, Sullivan's clients had filed a comprehensive criminal complaint with the FBI that detailed Madison's insider trading scheme, billing fraud, and securities violations. The complaint included Dad's stolen retirement money as part of a larger pattern of financial crimes totaling more than $3 million. But the most devastating evidence came from an unexpected source. Jennifer Walsh, my ally at Madison's law firm, had been secretly recording conversations with Madison for months. Jennifer had started recording after Madison had begun pressuring her to participate in billing fraud schemes. She'd been documenting Madison's criminal requests as protection against being implicated herself. What Jennifer didn't realize was that her recordings captured Madison discussing her theft from Dad and her plans to frame me for mental instability. Emma is so pathetically jealous of my success that she'll believe anything I tell her about family finances, Madison's voice said clearly on one recording. I've got her convinced that I'm stealing from Dad when I'm actually just managing his investments through a shell company. The stupid bitch doesn't understand sophisticated financial planning. Other recordings captured Madison laughing about her parents' financial stress, boasting about her insider trading profits, and planning her defense strategy with David Goldman. Most damning of all, one recording featured Madison admitting to Goldman that she'd been systematically stealing from Dad for 3 years and planned to continue until she could move the money to untraceable offshore accounts. The old man worked his entire life to save that money, and now he gets to watch me spend it on things he could never afford, Madison said on the recording. He should be proud that his daughter is finally living like she deserves to live. The recordings destroyed any possibility that Madison's crimes were misunderstandings or that my accusations were delusional. Her own words in her own voice documented years of premeditated theft and fraud. Sullivan presented all this evidence to the FBI, the District Attorney's Office, and the State Bar Association simultaneously. Within days, Madison was arrested at her office in front of her colleagues and clients. The charges included wire fraud securities, fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, money laundering, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. David Goldman was arrested the same day on charges of witness tampering and obstruction of justice. Maria Santos agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for immunity, admitting that Goldman had coerced her into betraying our case through financial threats and emotional manipulation. The vindication was swift and overwhelming. Morrison Klein and Associates publicly apologized for not detecting Madison's crimes sooner and announced they were implementing new oversight procedures. Uncle Tom called Dad to confirm that the evidence against Madison was legitimate and overwhelming. Even Aunt Patricia called to apologize for doubting my accusations. But the most meaningful vindication came from my parents. Dad called the morning after Madison's arrest, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma, sweetheart, I owe you the biggest apology of my life," he said. "You were trying to protect our family, and I almost let that monster convince me you were sick. Can you ever forgive me?" The case against Madison was so strong that her new attorney advised her to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. But Madison's arrogance wouldn't let her accept responsibility, even when faced with overwhelming evidence. She insisted on going to trial, convinced that her charm and legal training would save her. That decision would prove to be the final mistake in a life full of devastating choices. Madison's trial lasted 3 weeks and became the most humiliating public spectacle I'd ever witnessed. Every local news station covered the proceedings, fascinated by the story of a successful lawyer who'd stolen from her own elderly parents while committing millions of dollars in securities fraud. The prosecution's case was devastating and methodical. They presented bank records showing every transfer from Dad's account to Madison's shell company. They played Jennifer's recordings of Madison boasting about her crimes and mocking our parents' financial struggles. They brought in FBI agents who testified about the insider trading scheme and the sophisticated money laundering operation Madison had constructed. Detective Ray Sullivan took the stand for 2 full days, walking the jury through Madison's web of financial crimes with the precision of someone who'd spent decades pursuing white-collar criminals. His testimony was so comprehensive that even Madison's new defense attorney seemed overwhelmed by the evidence. But the moment that will stay with me forever was when Dad testified about discovering the theft. This strong man who'd worked double shifts for 30 years to provide for his family broke down completely on the witness stand as he described realizing that his own daughter had been systematically stealing his retirement savings. "I trusted her completely," Dad said through tears. "She was my daughter, my pride and joy. I would have given her anything she needed if she'd just asked. Instead, she stole our future and let us believe we were failing financially because of my wife's cancer treatment." Mom testified about the additional stress Madison's theft had placed on her during cancer treatment, explaining how they'd been forced to delay some medical procedures because they thought they couldn't afford them. The revelation that Madison had been stealing reimbursement money meant for Mom's medical expenses left the entire courtroom silent. Madison's defense strategy was predictably narcissistic. Her attorney tried to portray her as a victim of mental illness, claiming that work stress and family pressure had driven her to make poor decisions. They argued that her crimes were aberrations, not reflections of her true character. Madison herself took the stand against her attorney's advice, apparently convinced that her charisma could sway the jury. It was a disaster. Under cross-examination, she showed no genuine remorse for her crimes and actually seemed annoyed that her family hadn't appreciated her financial sophistication. When the prosecutor asked if she felt any guilt about stealing from her elderly father, Madison replied, "I was managing family assets more effectively than he ever could have. My investment strategies generated far better returns than his conservative savings approach." The prosecutor pressed further. "But those weren't your assets to manage, were they?" Madison's response sealed her fate. "My father spent 30 years working in a factory because he lacked the vision and education to create real wealth. I was finally putting his money to productive use instead of letting it sit in low-yield savings accounts." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Madison was convicted on all charges: 17 counts of wire fraud, 8 counts of securities fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, money, lawn laundering, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in federal prison and ordered her to pay full restitution plus penalties totaling over $4.2 million. David Goldman received 3 years for witness tampering and obstruction of justice. He was also disbarred and ordered to pay substantial fines. Maria Santos received probation and community service for her cooperation, though her career as a forensic accountant was effectively over. But the legal consequences were just the beginning of Madison's downfall. The State Bar Association permanently revoked her license to practice law. Morris & Klein and Associates fired her and sued her for damages to their reputation. The corporate clients who'd been defrauded filed civil lawsuits that would continue for years. Most devastating of all, Madison lost everything she'd gained through her crimes. Federal asset forfeiture laws allowed prosecutors to seize her condo, her BMW, her designer clothes, her jewelry, and all her investment accounts. Every luxury she'd bought with stolen money was sold to help pay restitution to her victims. The recovery process for our family was slower than I'd expected. Dad got back most of his stolen retirement money through asset seizures and insurance claims, but the emotional damage took much longer to heal. Mom struggled with depression, feeling somehow responsible for Madison's choices. Dad blamed himself for not detecting the theft sooner, but we also discovered strength in our family that we'd never recognized before. The extended family members who'd stood by us during the crisis became closer than ever. Uncle Tom helped Dad restructure his finances and plan for a secure retirement. Aunt Patricia, who'd initially doubted my accusations, became one of our strongest supporters and helped Mom through her emotional recovery. Jennifer Walsh left Morris & Klein and Associates and started her own practice focused on ethics and compliance consulting. She credited our case with teaching her the importance of standing up to powerful people who abuse their positions. We became close friends, bonding over our shared experience of exposing Madison's crimes. Detective Ray Sullivan retired from private investigation but stayed in touch with our family. He told me that our case was one of the most satisfying of his career because it demonstrated that family loyalty shouldn't protect criminals from consequences. The most unexpected positive outcome was the relationship I developed with my parents. Before Madison's crimes came to light, I'd always felt like the disappointing daughter who'd chosen a low-paying career over financial success. But going through this crisis together helped them see my true character and values. "Emma, you saved our family," Dad told me 6 months after Madison's sentencing. "Not just financially, but emotionally and morally. You showed us what real integrity looks like, what real love for family means." I learned important lessons about chosen family during this period. The people who stood by us during the crisis, Jennifer, Uncle Tom, Aunt Patricia, even Detective Sullivan, became more important to us than some blood relatives who'd abandoned us when things got difficult. Madison was transferred to a federal prison in another state, and none of us have had any contact with her since her sentencing. She sent one letter to Dad during her first month in prison, asking for money for commissary items and complaining about prison conditions. Dad threw the letter away without responding. "Some people never learn," Mom said when Dad told her about the letter. "Madison is still expecting other people to take care of her problems." The media attention from Madison's case led to unexpected opportunities for me to speak about family financial abuse and elder fraud. I testified before state legislative committees about strengthening protections for elderly victims of family members' crimes. Several social service organizations asked me to develop training programs for recognizing financial abuse in family situations. This work became deeply meaningful to me, giving purpose to the trauma our family had endured. I realized that Madison's crimes had taught me things about manipulation, financial abuse, and family dynamics that I could use to help other families avoid similar devastation. 2 years after Madison's sentencing, Dad was able to retire comfortably with his financial security restored and even enhanced through the investment returns on his recovered assets. Mom's health continued to improve, and the stress-related complications she'd experienced during the crisis gradually resolved. Our family gatherings are smaller now, but much more authentic. We don't have to pretend that Madison's superficial success represented family achievement. We can focus on real relationships, honest communication, and genuine support for each other's dreams and challenges. Looking back on this experience, I'm grateful that Madison said I wasn't worth a seat at the family table that Christmas. Her cruelty exposed her true character and motivated me to investigate the financial irregularities I'd discovered. If she'd been kinder to me, I might have ignored the warning signs and let her continue stealing from our family for years. Madison thought she was punishing me for not meeting her standards of success. Instead, she gave me the motivation to pursue justice and discover my own strength and resilience. She wanted to make me feel worthless, but she actually helped me realize my true worth to my family and community. Have you ever discovered that someone close to you was living a complete lie? How did it change your perspective on trust and family relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand that sometimes standing up to family members is the most loving thing you can do. Thank you for listening to my family's journey from betrayal to justice. Remember that real family isn't about blood connections or shared last names. It's about people who support each other through difficult times and celebrate each other's authentic achievements. The most important lesson I learned is that you don't have to accept abuse or dishonesty from anyone, even family members. Sometimes protecting yourself and your loved ones means exposing uncomfortable truths and facing temporary consequences. But in the end, truth and justice create stronger foundations for real relationships than silence and denial ever could.